This week's episode is with Denise Farquharson. She's an emotional intelligence coach. We have a great conversation about her career journey, how she got into emotional intelligence, what it means for her, artificial intelligence, AI, and how that's going to impact emotional intelligence, the importance of careful communication, making sure that leaders think really carefully about how they talk to people and the impact that they're going to have. And then also we talk about the processes of feeling, thinking, saying, and doing, and how our thoughts affect our end results. And it's a big cycle. What you feel affects how you think, affects what you say, affects what you do. And then your results will affect how you feel, which will then start the whole cycle all over again. So we have a great conversation. I know that you're going to enjoy this episode, but if you don't, let me know. Email us at hello@dunamiseq.com. I'm Tolu, and I created this podcast to connect you to leaders like Denise, people who lead with emotional intelligence so that you can know how to lead yourself and others better through emotional intelligence. Let's get into the episode. Denise, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. So I came across some of your content on LinkedIn and it just really, really resonated with me. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's great. I'm looking forward to it too. And that anybody who listens to this afterwards will absolutely get some gems, hopefully, by what we talk about, right?
I'm very, very confident in that. So my first question for you is, what is the toughest lesson that you've learnt as a leader so far?
Ooh, toughest lesson as a leader. Goodness. There's quite a few. There's quite a few. But I do recall actually, and I usually tell people who I work with and even some of my clients that just be careful how you talk to people, how you treat people, and even to a certain degree, how you think about other people as well. Reason being,
interesting.
Those same people that you may end up leading, guiding, managing, looking after, especially within corporate, sometimes with a reorg, a redundancy, a reshuffle, call it whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
You could end up being their leader, or they could be your leader, or they could end up getting a new position where you've got a matrix activity going on, and you're going to have to swallow, a sour ball, basically, because all of a sudden you have to work for them.
Yeah.
And yet you may have treated them in a certain way or thought about them in a certain way. Or all of a sudden you might be seconded out and then brought back in and or interim. And then you're having to learn that hard lesson as a leader that actually treat people the way you want to be treated, no matter what's going on. And I know corporate can be pretty fierce, right, sometimes, and public sector as well. But treat people the way you want to be treated, because you never know how the organization is going to shuffle around.
Yeah, the cookie crumbles in very, very different ways.
Yes, definitely. Which is why I think emotional intelligence is so important as well, because obviously the relationship skills that you build up with your good emotional intelligence traits will help you to always treat people well and the way that you want to be treated anyway. So it's crucial that leaders have that, for sure.
Just before we get into emotional intelligence, something that you mentioned was really intriguing. You said, be careful how you think about them. And that's actually quite different, because no one knows how you think about someone. So why do you say be careful how you even think about them?
Because your thoughts become your actions, right? and I tell you why. And I'm going to go a little bit into the emotional intelligence, because I usually teach people about how to have good, strong self-knowing. And I always go, the approach I take is usually, you know what? Think about what you feel, what you think, what you say, what you do. Split that into 25%, making 100%. And if you feel a certain feeling when something's been said or done, or you read an email and you feel a feeling, how much time do you spend in that feeling? And it should be about 25%, for instance, if we're going to put data to it. And I know you like data, right?
Love data.
And then you got to think about, okay, once I feel something, how do I think about it? And that should be another 25%. I felt this feeling. This is what I'm going to think about that feeling. And then this is what I'm going to say about that feeling or write about that feeling. It's a reply to an email, for instance. And then this is what I'm going to do about it, i.e. carry out the task, make a note, put it in my diary, whatever. And if you spend time going from thinking straight to doing before you sense the feel, sort the think out, say something or write something, you could end up acting and doing something that you regret. So in order to know yourself well, spend time in all of those areas. And that can be within a split second. Feel, think, say, do. Feel, think, say, do. Which then means when you're thinking about a particular person in the team, that I learned as a leader, actually, be careful. What you're thinking can then manifest itself in your behavior or in what you write and how you then lead the team. That's the reason why I think the thinking is really, really important.
Would you mind sharing your example of how you learned that tough lesson?
I ended up with a leader. In fact, no, I ended up leading someone who used to be my leader, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. And I remember applying for a role that I wasn't so sure if I'd get it, and I didn't get it. But the way I turned up at the interview and the way I showed my skills and my talent, I then got another phone call saying, you didn't get the job, Denise, but we've created a new role that we think you can do. And we want you to have a team. And they gave me the team and they reshuffled and gave me my old manager to manage.
What was that like?
To say, you know what? In fact, it happened twice. So the first time it happened, they were not too happy. However, I knew their talent. So I partly put them in charge of a whole new section that I created that they could lead. And I gave them a lot of autonomy around that because I knew that if it was me in that position, I probably would have thought, oh my goodness, what on earth is going on, right? And that's how I shaped that particular situation. And then when it happened to me again, the first week I was in that role, something went majorly wrong. I mean, I'm obviously not going to go into the ins and outs of it, but it cost thousands of pounds in terms of the IT situation that went wrong. And I needed help. And it happened within a week of me starting that role. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to need that leader again. So I did. I reached out and hands up. I do not know. No, I do know what to do, but I need your expertise to overshadow my thinking and my decision making to make sure that I de-risk this situation as quickly as possible. And they were obliging because I approached it as being, you are the best in the business and it's not my fault necessarily that you are in the role that you're in. So therefore, help me. And they did. And we resolved it. It took a few weeks, database rehashes, database, what do they call them when you're having to refresh? Yeah, refresh databases and so on. That was in my IT days. But yeah, it's a good lesson to learn.
So where do you think that humility fits into all of this? Because it sounds like in those moments, you have to kind of be very humble, whether you're asking for help or leading someone where the dynamic was they were your leader before. Like that can go very wrong very quickly. So where do you feel like humility fits into all of this?
It's interesting because I remember years ago I was teaching really young children about a Bible character called Moses and how he was, we used to say, he's meek but not weak, okay?
Yeah.
And to take 1 million people out of the land that they live in and take them across the Red Sea and the parting of the Red Sea and so on. And some of you who are listening to the podcast may have seen the movie and seen how that happens. Yet he was super humble. And it's that whole aspect of, I kind of know what I'm good at. And I'm confident in that. And therefore, I don't have to show it off. I don't have to declare it. I
Mm.
don't have to necessarily prove it above and beyond anybody else. But what I can do is use it to get good benefits, use my talent to get good outcomes, and use my humility to get the output that we need for the team, not just for Denise. And that's where I always use my humility in terms of, ultimately, the goal, the objective, the mission is A, B, or C. So if I get my team or function or department to understand it from that perspective, we're all heading in the same direction, rather than you're doing Denise's task to get Denise to look good. It's irrelevant.
And I think sometimes humility is a bit misunderstood, in terms of sometimes it's like, well, you just have to downplay anything that you're good at. But I think it's that thing of properly understanding what you're good at, what you're not good at, and then operating from that place. So it's not being, better than you, not thinking better than you actually are, but being very like realistic with, actually, I'm good at this, and this is how I can support, and this is how I can serve.
Yes. And even serving is, you're right, servant leadership, and there's humble leadership, and there's some servants who are not so humble.
Yeah,
But if you
it's
can
true.
get the two at a very good level, so, I will still roll up my sleeves and try and fix a problem, and not just, pick somebody else to you do this, you do that, and you do the other. No, it's actually, we'll all in this together. Let's all attack the tasks that are in our talent space, and the things that all of us need to come together with and fix and sort. Let's do it. Let's brainstorm. Let's, make it work together. It's key. Absolutely key.
I think it's that willingness to do, in a way, that's part of humility, is that, like, yes, you are the leader, but that doesn't mean that you don't get your hands dirty. It doesn't mean you're not willing to do the things that also need to be done. I think that willingness is really key.
Yes, indeed. And it's interesting, Tolu, because I read something yesterday that talked about being the type of leader that, well, I can't say this and I can't say that, and I can't, have fun at X or Y or Z, and actually just be yourself as a leader. And that will give you that natural, authentic, vulnerableness about you that really gives you that edge that people will recognize. And when they see your true self, then it really allows them to connect with you better. But if you're not it will soon be obvious when you're not authentic, because people will be tippy-toeing around you as a leader. And that is not helpful, because you'll never get the true value and talent from your people if they're tippy-toeing around you. And you'll see, you'll ask yourself, you'll know in your gut as a leader, who's tippy-toeing around me. Yeah.
I think it's such an interesting balance between kind of being your authentic self and also knowing that you have things to work on, because I think that sometimes people behave badly and they're like, well, that's just who I am. It's like, yeah, you are being authentic, but you're being authentically horrible, right? That's not actually that's not how you want to lead. So I think it's a really interesting balance. And how do people strike that balance of knowing that you're trying to work on something? So you might want to frame things a bit differently, even though that might not feel like how you want to. What do you think that balance is?
Authentically horrible. You know what? It takes a team member to be very brave to say you're being not quite right. And I often teach people this, actually. Offer to the person, I'm curious. I need to know what is the best way to handle when you respond to not all the tasks being done, for instance. Or I'm curious how, so if you're a team member and you have a leader who's authentically horrible, here's a clue, okay? I'm curious how, when you want the best, but you can't articulate what the best is, that you expect to see the best to turn up. Or I'm curious that, when you are wanting to be overwhelmed by a particular activity, that you spell out accurately what that task should cover.
Mm.
And by using those words, it really helps the team member to then get under the grain nicely and with respect, to then understand what that leader really wants from them. And then, so that's for a team member, okay? If you are a leader listening to this and you think, I want you to openly ask yourself the question, am I authentic, but am I horrible? Be brave to ask yourself that question. How do you know you are? There's body language, there's tone of your people around you, your senior leadership team. There's how, when you show up, how people respond. When you demand, how quickly do you get the answers? And potentially those things that you look at could be giving you the indication that actually you are a tell, directive, demanding, which is okay to have those things in your style. However, are you being authentically respectful? Are you being authentically open to new ideas? Are you being authentically, I can't even say the word now, Tolu. Are you being authentically serving? As well. And when you start to turn it on its head and for you to learn from that perspective, that will give you some insights into, okay, you can't change your behavior overnight, but maybe just write down a couple of the things when you look into it a little bit deeper, leader. What could you do just to adjust slightly to make it even better?
Do you know what? I love what you said about, are you being authentically serving? Are you being authentically respectful? Because I think authenticity shouldn't just stop at being your authentic self. You should also be respectful. You should be kind. You should be generous, and you should be those things authentically. It's not manipulation. It's not fake. So I love that. And I'm going to say that. Are you being authentically kind? Are you being authentically serving? I really like that distinction between the two.
Yeah. Brilliant. And it's to be worked on. Leaders are never, ever still. They are always, good leaders are always stretching, learning, and becoming better at their leadership. And especially because nowadays as well, we've gone through COVID, the whole corporate world's changing, the public sector's changing. Everything's changing, really. AI is here. Chatbots, they're saying chatbots are taking over our jobs. No, they're not.
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
Stop it.
But
Stop it.
the thing is, things are changing, and therefore the leadership styles are changing as well. And even, are you a leader in AI? And understanding the mind of an AI versus the mind of who you are authentically, because that will give you that, whole human side versus the computer side of things. And it's to be considered because it's growing at a rapid rate, for sure.
How do you think AI...
That's a whole different podcast, though, Toli.
I was going to ask you, how do you think AI interplays with emotional intelligence?
Ooh, I think very much you can learn from an AI about you can learn from artificial intelligence about emotional intelligence. You can learn the knowledge of it. It can give you, you can easily just ask a chatbot, give me the top 5 things I must do to, practice emotional intelligence, and it will give it to you. The data's there. But what it can't give you is those examples where help me to practice my emotional intelligence strategy. So, for instance, shall I give you an example? So, let's use empathy. If I say to a chatbot, show me how to increase my emotional intelligence trait of empathy, it may tell me, I teach 3 things. I teach Do you put your hand down in the hole and pull somebody up? That's empathy. Do you get a ladder and throw it down the hole and say, okay, make your way up? Or do you go down there with the ladder, help
Mm.
the person up the ladder, and
Mm.
then make your way up as well?
Mm.
I don't think an AI is going to tell me that, because it's three different scenarios of how much empathy you show.
Mm.
And then it's not even going to tell me about self-empathy either, which is another aspect as a leader. How much self-empathy do I have and show and declare? So it can help with the practical academic side and definitions and knowledge, but it's not going to be so great at having that human touch of how to practice. And actually, if I've practiced yesterday being very empathetic towards Tolu, how will I know? How will I measure it? How will I know how to be better at that? Because you can't necessarily measure human interaction.
That's interesting.
And AIs aren't so good at that unless we load it with lots of data, obviously. But that's another.
Which we probably are going to. So I think it's not there yet, but I do wonder if there's going to be a world where, you know, you've got the glasses that are watching, seeing what you see, hearing what you hear, and then feeding back information. I wonder if that's where we're going. But like you said, that is another podcast.
It's interesting, and I'll come on to self-empathy in a second. But Tolu, think about some of the movies that we watch where it's involving some type of robot, okay?
Yep.
And then when you get to that point where it gets deep, it gets meaningful, it gets emotional.
Yeah.
And, you know, the robot starts to cry. Oh my goodness, it can't be a robot anymore, right? And the humans are shocked by that, okay? And even the robot is perplexed at the thought that they have expressed a piece of human emotion that they just didn't have in them or never thought that they had in their database. And you just think, we're bordering on those movies. Somebody has thought that through, and that's where we are now with our technology. And so us as humans have to make sure that we manage and interact with it, don't get me wrong, but equally still step up, because we are bigger and better and badder than a robot in terms of human interaction, for sure.
And I think that's the danger, right? Is that if you use it correctly, it can level us up. Like you said, like we'll be able to achieve things in hours that we would have taken weeks, months, you know, years to do before. But if we let it, it can also make us so lazy that we're too weak to do those basic human things. So it's a really fine balance.
Absolutely, for sure. And so even for self-empathy, you were going to ask me.
I've not really heard about that. So what is self-empathy? What does that mean?
Think of the empathy that you would show to your own family, team member, or as a leader to your organization, to your function, your department. You have to apply the same thing to yourself. So for instance, if you spot where the strategy is going a different direction, you do something about it. You show empathy towards the department or function that's not quite right, or the task that has caused you to not be achieving that final vision and goal. The same goes for your own self, because you have your own personal strategy. You have your own goals and visions that you're aiming for as a leader. Well, you should anyway, right? A good leader should. And therefore, when you maybe trip up, mess up, don't achieve, aim for, didn't quite make it, something came in the way, or a risk came in and caused it to go off track, again, you've got to not beat yourself up. You've got to show your own self empathy and show the same attention, not necessarily compassion. It doesn't need compassion and sympathy. Don't go that far. It just needs the same addressing to de-risk it, replan it, and then go forward.
Got it. Because I think, and maybe this is just based on how I frame things myself, because I think I played basketball. So for me, I have this kind of next play mentality of, if it goes wrong, it's okay, fix it. Next play, it's fine. Because I think when you first said self-empathy, I was wondering, is that like self-pity? Like, what's the difference between the two? But I now
Mhm.
understand what you're trying to say in terms of, like, don't be too hard on yourself. That's okay. But now don't wallow, move on, make it right. It's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And,
Got it.
as a good leader will always have something that will come their way where they will need to do that.
Mm,
That's how you'll grow.
yeah.
And you can't be pouring out empathy to others and not doing it for yourself, or else you'll have nothing left. You'll be
Yeah.
burnt out,
Yeah.
right?
Agreed.
So, yeah, it's that self-care as
Agreed.
well.
So I'd love to get a little bit into emotional intelligence. So what does emotional intelligence mean to you?
Okay, so emotional intelligence for me is, I think of it actually as 5 R's. It's how
Okay.
you read, you review, you regulate, you remind, you restore
Okay.
your thinking around the intelligence of your emotions and how they're showing up with yourself, with others, and the things that you are outside of others as well, like your systems and your tools that
Mm,
are
mm,
affecting how you do your work as a leader.
mm, mm.
So I tend to really stick to, yes, it is self-awareness, yes, it is that whole aspect of self-management and so on. But sometimes you can be self-aware, self-manage, but if you don't read and review and revise
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
regulate on a regular basis, then that does not, it's not helpful at all. So you need to keep practicing those R's. That's how I see it. Yeah.
And I guess that's
Yeah,
where
for
the
sure.
intelligence aspect of it, in terms of growing in intelligence, comes from that reading, reviewing, all of those kind of things. That's how you grow and become more intelligent, is that you learn from what's
Yeah,
happening, right?
yeah, absolutely. 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 And, again, most leaders do read. Good
Mm,
leaders usually read, and read books and podcasts and, audios and whatever they can get their hands on to just stretch a little bit more, learn a little bit more, grow a little bit more. That's all part of your emotional intelligence, because emotionally intelligent leaders do not just stay where they are.
mm,
Growth is absolutely important for them,
mm, mm,
and it helps them to not just be satisfied and content with
mm,
the knowledge that they have, but to explore and be flexible
mm,
in the new knowledge that's out there
mm.
from others, from their team, from other leaders as well. And that's crucial for being a better leader tomorrow, and a better leader by the end of the week, and a better leader next week.
Mm,
Or
mm.
else you just stand still and stagnant. And you don't want that. That's boring.
No, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Would you mind explaining a bit about or sharing your journey? Where did you start your career? So you do emotional intelligence coaching now. So how did you get into that? I'd just love to hear your journey.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So I was in the IT world,
Okay.
and I did IT for, gosh, about 18 years. I did it for.
Wow.
But there was a part of my journey where, actually, when I spoke to you earlier about the role that I didn't get,
Yes.
I was gutted. Of course I was. But the
Mm,
role I was given was actually a role that I'd never heard of before.
okay.
It was a new manager who'd come in, and he says, Denise, I think you could do it. I says, nah, there's no way I can do that. I don't think it's going to work.
Mm,
Because the way he described it to me, it was classed as software release manager at the time. It was the early days of when release managers were coming in
okay.
and delivering software.
Mm,
And those of you who are on the call who are not familiar with software release manager, in a short little sentence, I can say, if you've got an iPhone or if you've got an Android phone and it keeps telling you update and install a new update and install a new update, basically that's called software release management. Somebody behind the scenes
mm,
is packaging a load of updates to fix things on your phone.
mm,
Okay? So I said to him, there's no way that's going to work.
So what were you doing before that? What was your role before?
I was doing application software management.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I was running a team of programmers in HTML and COBOL programmers and people who were doing apps as well.
Okay.
So it was a team of, those three aspects. So, but then we were obviously going live when we felt like it, right? And wondered why our customers were not happy.
They didn't know it was coming.
Exactly. They didn't know what was coming, and they didn't know what specialities they were going to get, and they didn't know, what the new install was going to be. And so he said, no, there's a better way of doing it. So I took up that role, but then he had to persuade me. But then I had to go and persuade all of the other teams where code was coming from.
Yes.
And the approach I took to that was a coaching approach. I just did it naturally. And I did it for year after year after year after year and realized, that's actually coaching. And then I got to a point where actually I was offered a voluntary redundancy, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to take it. I've been with the company a number of years, and I would use the time to take a year out and decide, what do you really want to do, Denise? And so I decided I don't want to do IT anymore. I want to do people. I'm tired of tech. I'm tired of, geeky, nerdy data stuff. So I was going to deal with the people around the geeky, nerdy data stuff instead. So I then got qualified.
Okay.
And the first job I did after that was I went back after a year. I did some traveling, went to Kenya, went to California, did my qualifications. And then I thought, right, okay, I'll look for another job now. Or I would run my own coaching business. And so I decided to do both. Okay. But the first job I took on was come in and help some design engineers to design differently from a coaching style. And by doing that, they then said, okay, now that they have redesigned some of their product, I want you to now do the software release management for the product. So it was a dual role.
Yes.
Which in some ways kind of helped me realize, you know what, this is how coaching can work for leaders. And those design engineers were stuck. They were stuck in a loop of this is how I deliver a product. And I was able to coach them to do something different. And with that, it then allowed me to realize actually applying the coaching, working with the people can still impact a product, can still impact. I won't declare what the product was on your podcast, but I still see it every single day, that product.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So with that, it made me realize I have got a talent. I have got some great skills. I've now got the qualifications to go with it. And since then, I've always been servicing clients and working with teams or working with other people to help them just get from A to B to C. You don't have to stay at A. And it's important for leaders to remember this. Don't stay at A. You've got B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Keep going, keep moving, stretching, keep going. And it's not as if if you're a leader listening to this, it's not as if you've not done it before. You've transitioned from another place before. If you've done it before, you can do it again. But are you going to do it into a different sector? Are you going to do it with more courage? Are you going to do it carrying the lessons learned from the previous transition?
Love
that. So I always encourage them, look, don't be afraid of it. Transition's easy. You've done it before. Do it again and again and again. And start to leave that legacy for the people who are watching you, your own family, and for yourself, because you are put on this earth for a reason. Therefore, fulfill that reason and go for it. Don't be afraid.
Is part of what you do helping people to find that reason?
Yeah, because with coaching, the kind of coaching I do, it's two parts.
Hmm.
There's one where it's I don't direct. It's what we call indirective coaching.
Okay.
Okay. And with indirective coaching, you end up exploring into areas that the coachee takes themselves to, not you taking them to that place.
Okay.
But it's done very carefully and very with some deep listening and connecting with the person that you're coaching with. But then I also do some, my emotional intelligence part of it was when I was given a particular role where some senior executives just were in a cultural space that just wasn't quite right. And so I was placed on, being an emotional intelligence coach. So I went through a whole training process to assess a senior executive, filling out about 70 questions, looking at the results, understanding what they mean, and then coaching them on the results. And those results were all about the emotional intelligence traits, 10 of them altogether that I really focus on. So self-knowing, self-confidence, self-actualization, self-reliance, empathy, optimism, adaptability, flexibility, and also about, being optimistic for the future and making changes so that you can take your whole department or your whole directorate down a particular strategy and make it work. So that kind of coaching became, actually, I've got a whole load of results here. This is what it's saying to me. You're amazing and very empathetic, but your self-confidence is showing us maybe not as strong as it could be. Or you're very optimistic about the future and you can adapt to change, but actually your engagement and your relationship skills with others and the team needs some development. It's weak. It just needs development, or it's not as strong as others. And so that's why I was started to do more directive coaching as opposed to indirective coaching, and still do it today. Love it.
How does the directive coaching work in like a practical sense? So would you mind doing like a bit of a role play if I be the person that you're doing some directive coaching with, and then you show me what that looks like? So I've learned a bit about indirective coaching where you ask lots of questions to get people to realize, but I've never really heard of directive coaching. So what does that look like?
Okay, so let me give you an example then. So let's see. If you give me a task that you're doing tomorrow, for instance.
I'll be delivering a course to some learners, for example.
Course to some learners. Okay, great. And are you ready for the course? Have you planned everything already?
For me, planning does not necessarily mean I'm ready. I'm ready in terms of I'm okay with it, but I've not done extensive planning.
Okay. And it starts at what time tomorrow? Sorry?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock tomorrow. Okay. And have you delivered this before?
Yeah. No, actually, I haven't.
Okay. So what outcomes are you expecting if it's tomorrow morning at 10 and you've not yet delivered? Never delivered it before. How will you know you get the right outcome?
I think that I'll know I get the right outcome from gauging feedback from the learners. So understanding if people have understood what I've delivered to them, and also if they've enjoyed the class.
And so have you prepared the feedback questions that you'll ask of them to get the right answers that you're looking for?
I've got some informal feedback questions. So at certain points, I'll check in with them and ask, how are you finding it? Is there something that, hasn't made sense yet? Is there something I need to say differently? But I don't have a list of formal questions, but I've got some thoughts about how I'll check in with them.
Right. And then once you've done that, how will you know how well it's gone? In terms of you've got the feedback, you've delivered it at 10 o'clock, it finishes, I don't know, let's just say 11, something like that. How will you know if you were to do it again on Thursday, what you would have to change or do differently?
I think I would get a general feeling in terms of like likes or thumbs up or whatever from the chat, but I don't know if that would necessarily give me the specifics that I would need to improve for the next time.
So now I would even probably go into an indirect question and say, so what would you consider that you ought to do to make that be more effective for you, Tolu?
Got you. But that's the
Or
indirect
I would
part.
then say, that's an indirective, or then say, have you considered using a spreadsheet to capture your data? Or, yeah, because now I'm guiding you and telling you and letting you know the best way to capture your data, but that may not work for you. You might want to put your data on a bunch of Post-its, not a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So I'm directing you that way, but actually, deep down inside, that's not the best way for you to work.
Right. But then I would then kind of say, well, actually, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. And then through that, I figured out actually what I want to do anyway.
If you're an honest coachee, yes. But you might be feeling deep down inside, I don't want to tell Denise that. Yeah, I'll do it that way, Denise, whatever. But deep down inside, that's not your solution. And that's the thing about indirective coaching. The solution comes from you as the coachee, not Denise.
Got it.
And therefore, you take it on much more willingly. And you get better results because you've made the decision to get the feedback, plan it, not leave it till last minute.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. That's really interesting because I'd not heard of directive coaching before, so it's good to see how that works. And I am actually prepared for my session tomorrow. So yeah, just to be clear, I am prepared for my session tomorrow.
And that's why sometimes it can be really difficult for when people see the word coaching.
Yes,
they might see business coach, career coach, and think, all coaching is coaching. No, actually, those are very directive coaching. Whereas leadership coaching, emotional intelligence coaching is partly both to a certain degree. But true leadership coaching, or just, flat out coaching that is good quality and gives you the answers that the coachee comes up with, and you can go back to it and know they've got the right answers.
Yes.
Is the indirective way without fail.
So why did you choose to focus on emotional intelligence? Because leadership coaching is quite a broad category, but emotional intelligence coaching is quite specific. So what made you choose emotional intelligence?
Well, at the time, leadership coaching was all about the course that I took and qualified for is to go into companies and set up coaching pools for them, so that I could then train their team managers and or team leaders to become coaches themselves, so they can carry out coaching for their teams. And I could set that up in corporate spaces. For the emotional intelligence coaching, what happened was after I did my assessment and saw my strengths and my areas of development, oh my goodness, I was just in shock in terms of that answered so many questions about my style, who I am, how I show up, how I led up to that point, how I wanted to lead up to that point, but some things never quite fell into place. And that was a massive opening for me. So whenever I do emotional intelligence coaching for others now, I want them to experience that aha moment that, guess what? Assessments aren't pure science, but the way it's done and the answers it gives is just such an eye-opener. It's a bit like sometimes when some people as leaders go and do a personality test. And then they determine, I'm red, or I'm green, or I'm yellow, or I'm a buffoon, or I'm a snake, or I'm an elephant, depending on which personality test they've done, right? Or I'm ENTJ, Myers-Briggs, or INFT. Whatever they come up with, it's an eye-opener, and it makes them really realize, hold on a second, this is an opening and an aha moment for me. What a lot of these tests fail on or maybe it's just the way that some of the facilitators do it actually, is not only understand yourself, but also show how you can adjust your style
Yes.
to encompass somebody else's style, so that
Wow.
mutuality, right?
So as a red, this is how I would accommodate or include a blue, for example.
Exactly.
Love that.
Exactly. Whereas most people, when they're a red or a blue, they usually say, I'm red. And that's
So
the
you
reason
have to
why I've
adjust
done
for
that.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. Not very often I hear people say, I'm a red, but I understand your blueness and I'm going to accommodate. Let's go halfway. Yeah. It's very, very, very rare you hear that. So what I do with the emotional intelligence is I tend to highlight the strengths, highlight the scenarios where those strengths appear, then also highlight the areas that are developed and need further development, but which areas need development and how can it be done? I go through all of that as well over a period of time to show, actually, if I start practicing saying to somebody, I can resonate with that, Tolu. I'm starting to enhance my empathy. Yeah. If I start saying to my team, this is last minute, but I'm going to go with you all the way with this because this is the outcome we'd want to do at the team. And guess what? We can all celebrate together. I'm starting to work on my relationship skills of equality and mutuality of we're in this together. If I start saying things like, I'm very competent at dealing with this situation, but I need you all to support me and cheer me on, then I'm working on the aspect of self-confidence, which is that imposter syndrome aspect of my self-confidence. It's not that I'm not qualified. It's just that I don't love myself enough to prove to everybody that I'm not a fraud. So sometimes I will even go through, this is the things you say, these are the things you do, and these are the things you start to think to enhance your emotional intelligence.
As you've been doing the emotional intelligence coaching, what's been the most impactful result that you feel like you've seen from someone that you've coached?
Oh, I had one the other day, actually, where somebody who was always, what were they? They were always a project manager in a sector, then moved into a completely different sector with EBGBs, and then sent me the message the first day, then the first week that they were there, and then months later, Denise, best thing I ever did. I never thought I could do it. So it was almost a career coaching,
Yes,
but using their emotional intelligence strengths and development areas. And I'll never forget that one. That was just like, a massive jump, but it made a difference. Made a difference, yeah, for sure.
Just as we close, what are the top 3 things that you would say to someone who wants to improve their emotional intelligence?
Top 3 things would be 3 words. Practice, practice again, and keep practicing. Because it will never happen overnight. But you will always have scenarios to practice. You can practice on your family, your children, your next door neighbor. If you don't want to do it at work and in the corporate space. If you want to practice it at work, you can do it with trusted individuals who you will say, you know what? I really want to work on my optimism. These are the 2 things I'm going to start to do. I'm going to check in with you at the end of every week. And just let me know how I'm doing from your perspective, because perspectives are powerful. Okay. But I would say practice, practice, practice. And even on LinkedIn, I'm always giving tips and strategies of try this, do this, think this way, say this, etc. as to how to keep practicing. Because until you practice, you can think about it all you like, feel that you're doing it right. But if you don't say it and do it, that self-knowing piece, back to that point, Feel, think,
Mm.
say, do.
Mm.
I'm an amazing leader. My emotional intelligence is wonderful. Really? Practice, practice, practice. Even I have to practice sometimes.
Yeah.
And I practice what I preach and remind myself, come on, Denise, is that really how it should be done? How it should be said? How you should be feeling? Are those 3 words allowed, Tolu?
They are allowed because you've told people some of the stuff to practice along the way. So they
There
are
you
allowed.
go. There you go.
They are allowed.
Excellent. Excellent.
Denise, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been really, really insightful, and I've really just enjoyed our conversation. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tolu. Thank you for having me. Appreciate
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye. Thank you for watching this episode of the Dunamis EQ Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, flick through our channel and there's loads more that you can watch. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can hear first when new episodes drop. We'll catch you on the next episode.